All right, let's dive into 20th century philosophy, which might sound a bit, well, old school, but these ideas are surprisingly relevant today. Like when we think about the meaning of life or even what truth is, we're kind of echoing some of these big philosophical debates. And you've given me this really interesting mix of sources on analytic and continental philosophy.
Yeah, two really different approaches, but both super important in shaping how we think today.
Exactly. And from what I've seen in these sources, it's like they're both responding to the same crazy world, but in such different
It's
ways.
like they're looking at the same puzzle, but with completely different tools.
I like that analogy. So let's start with analytic philosophy, which, from your sources, seems to be all about bringing a kind of scientific method to philosophy.
Right. Like imagine philosophers putting on their detective hats, trying to use logic and language to break down these big, complex ideas into smaller, more manageable pieces.
And this desire for clarity and precision, it wasn't just some intellectual exercise, right? Like it was a response to what was happening in the world at the time.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. World wars, new technologies, everything was changing so fast. The old ways of thinking just weren't cutting it anymore.
So people were looking for new ways to make sense of things. And that's where we get logical positivism, right? Like these philosophers were serious skeptics, demanding proof for pretty much everything.
Yep. They believed that a statement only had meaning if you could verify it, either through observation or strict logical analysis.
So no more fuzzy abstract ideas. Everything had to be testable, measurable.
Pretty much. It's almost like they wanted to apply the scientific method to philosophy itself.
Okay, I see where this is going. So like if you can't test it in a lab, it's basically meaningless. So what about like the soul, the afterlife, all those big metaphysical questions?
Yeah, to a logical positivist, those ideas were pretty much off limits because you couldn't prove them scientifically.
So did people just give up on those questions then?
Well, not exactly. While logical positivism didn't last forever as the dominant philosophy, it definitely left its mark. Like that emphasis on clear, rigorous thinking, we still see that today, especially in fields like science and law.
I can see that. It's like they raised the bar for what counts as real knowledge. But there were some problems with this approach too, right? Like from what I'm reading, it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like the biggest problem, how do you verify the verification principle itself?
Oh, I see what you mean. It's like if you need proof for everything, how do you prove that you need proof? It's kind of a paradox, right?
Exactly. Like a snake eating its own tail. It became a bit of a philosophical headache.
That makes sense. So what happened next? Did philosophers just ditch the whole idea of logic and language?
Not entirely, but there was a definite shift in focus. Instead of trying to create this perfectly logical language, they started looking at how we actually use language in everyday life.
Okay, so it's like they realized that language isn't just this abstract system, it's something we use to do things in the world.
Exactly. And that's where we get ordinary language philosophy. Thinkers like J.L. Austin and Gilbert Ryle, they argued that a lot of philosophical problems come from misunderstanding how we use words in different situations.
Can you give me a concrete example? I'm still trying to wrap my head around this.
Sure, take Austin's speech act theory. He said that sometimes when we speak, we're not just describing things, we're actually performing actions with our words.
Okay, now we're talking. Give me an example.
Like when you say, I promise to do something, you're not just stating a fact, you're making a commitment. Like you're changing something in the world just by using words.
Wow, okay. So language isn't just about reflecting reality, it's about actually shaping it too.
Precisely. And that idea has had a huge impact on how we think about all sorts of things like the law, ethics, even politics.
It makes you realize how much power our words actually have. It's not just about words themselves, it's about the actions they can create.
Absolutely. And that's a key insight from ordinary language philosophy. By paying attention to how we use language in everyday life, we can start to unravel some of those philosophical knots and gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
This is where it gets really interesting because we've got this very precise, almost scientific approach with analytic philosophy, but then there's also continental philosophy, which seems to be all about these big existential questions, the stuff that really gets to the heart of what it means to be human. And I'm curious to see how these two approaches compare and contrast.
Yeah, it's like we've explored one side of the philosophical map, and now we're about to embark on a whole different journey. It's amazing how these two branches, analytic and continental philosophy, they kind of pop up around the same time, dealing with like the same crazy world, but they go in such different directions.
Yeah, it's like they're both trying to solve the same puzzle, but using completely different methods. So, continental philosophy, what I'm getting from your sources, is this real focus on these huge questions like the meaning of life, what it means to exist. Heavy stuff, especially when you think about what the world had just been through with those two world wars.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where existentialism comes in, right? Like, it's a philosophy that's born out of this feeling of crisis. It's trying to make sense of a world where all those old values and beliefs have been, like, totally shattered.
And one of your sources mentioned Jean-Paul Sartre, right? He's got that famous quote, existence precedes essence.
Ah, yes, Sartre.
Okay, so help me out here. What does that even mean?
Well, it's a pretty radical idea when you think about it. Sartre's basically saying that you're not born with some predetermined purpose, like you don't have this set of characteristics that you're just stuck with.
Okay, so it's not about finding out who you are. It's about creating who you want to be.
Exactly. You come into the world as this blank slate, and it's up to you to create your own meaning, your own essence through the choices that you make.
So it's all about freedom and responsibility then, right?
Huge emphasis on that, yeah. You're not defined by like your family, your society, or even your past. You have the power to choose your own path. But, and this is a big but, that freedom can also be pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like, on the one hand, you're completely free to create your own meaning, but on the other hand, the world feels like it's falling apart.
And that's where Sartre's idea of bad faith comes in. He says that a lot of times we try to avoid that anxiety of freedom by pretending we don't have a choice.
So it's like living on autopilot, just doing what's expected of you without really thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly. Just going through the motions, conforming to what society tells you to do.
Yeah.
And Sartre saw that as a form of self-deception. He thought we needed to embrace that freedom, even if it makes us uncomfortable, and take responsibility for creating our own lives.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because you also sent me some stuff about Simone de Beauvoir, and she was an existentialist too, but she was applying those ideas to the experience of women.
Right, de Beauvoir. She's a key figure in this. Like in her book, The Second Sex, she argues that women are often defined by society as the other. Like they're only seen in relation to men, not as individuals with their own unique experiences and possibilities.
So she's taking Sartre's ideas about freedom and choice and applying them to like gender roles and expectations.
Exactly. She's challenging this idea that there's some essential feminine nature that determines how women should behave. She's saying that those roles are socially constructed, and women, just like everyone else, have the freedom to define themselves.
Okay, yeah, I see the connection. That's super powerful. It's like she's taking existentialism out of the abstract and showing how it connects to real-world issues. Now, switching gears a bit, you also included some stuff on phenomenology, which seems to be about understanding the world through our own individual experiences. Feels like a whole different approach.
It is, in a way. If existentialism is all about, like, freedom and making choices, phenomenology is more about, like, our consciousness, how we perceive things. It's like hitting the reset button on how we see the world and going back to our raw, unfiltered experience.
Okay, help me visualize this. What does that look like in practice?
Okay, so think about how we usually experience the world, right? We're always putting things in categories, judging them, interpreting them based on what we already know, our past experiences.
Yeah, I guess so. We do that all the time without even realizing it.
Exactly. But phenomenology is like, let's strip all that away for a second and just focus on the experience itself. Not what we think about it, but just the raw feeling of it.
Okay, so it's not about what we think about the world, but about how we actually experience it directly, through our senses.
Precisely. And Edmund Husserl, he's like the founder of phenomenology. He came up with this method called phenomenological reduction. It's like putting the world on pause so you can just focus on the pure data of your senses. The colors, the shapes, the sounds, the feelings, all that stuff that makes up your experience.
You know, that actually sounds a bit like mindfulness meditation.
Oh yeah, totally. Mindfulness is definitely influenced by phenomenology. They both encourage us to pay more attention to what's happening right now without all the judgment and interpretation.
Okay, I see the connection. So phenomenology is about going deeper into our own subjective experience. But then you also sent me some things about Maurice Merleau-Ponty, and he seems to be saying that it's not just about what's going on in our heads, it's about our bodies too, right?
Exactly. Merleau-Ponty argued that we can't really separate our minds from our bodies. The way we experience the world is always shaped by, like, our senses, how we move, how we interact with our environment.
So it's not just about thinking about the world, it's about feeling it, sensing it, moving through it. It's like a much more embodied experience.
Totally. And that's had a huge impact on, like, psychology, cognitive science, even art. It makes us realize that our bodies aren't just these containers for our minds. They're a crucial part of how we understand the world.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. So we've gone from this very precise, logical approach with analytic philosophy to a much more embodied, experiential way of thinking with phenomenology.
And that shift takes us right to the core of continental philosophy, where the focus is on, like, the lived experience of being human with all its complexity and messiness.
Speaking of complexity, we can't wrap up this exploration of continental philosophy without talking about hermeneutics, right? From your notes, it seems to all about interpretation, how we make sense of things, how we understand each other, even ourselves.
You got it. Hermeneutics is basically the art of understanding. It's recognizing that meaning isn't just out there in the world waiting to be found. It's something that we create through our interactions with the world, through language, culture, history.
It's wild, right? We've started with analytic philosophy trying to break things down into these neat little pieces. And now with continental philosophy, it's all about embracing the messiness of being human.
And that's what makes hermeneutics so fascinating, right? It reminds us that there's no one right answer when it comes to understanding the world, each other, or even ourselves.
It's like we're all detectives trying to piece together clues, but those clues are always changing, and so are we.
Exactly. And one of the big names in hermeneutics is Martin Heidegger. He applied this whole idea of interpretation to, the most fundamental question there is,
Yeah.
being. What does it even mean to exist? What's our place in all of this?
I can already feel my brain doing somersaults. Heidegger's not exactly known for being easy to understand, but from your notes, it seems like he's saying we can't really understand ourselves outside of our historical and cultural context. Like, we're not just these isolated individuals.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. Heidegger argued that our understanding of being is always shaped by, like, the language we use, the traditions we inherit, the beliefs that have been passed down through generations. We're always in conversation with history, even if we don't realize it.
So it's like we're carrying around all this baggage from the past, but it's not just weighing us down, it's actually influencing how we see everything.
Totally. And then Hans-Georg Gadamer, another major figure in hermeneutics, he takes this idea even further. He says that understanding is always this fusion of horizons.
Okay, now that sounds super complicated. Break that down for me. What does it mean to fuse horizons?
It means that whenever we try to understand anything, whether it's a book, a historical event, another person, we're always bringing our own baggage to the table, right? Our own preconceptions, biases, all that.
Right.
But at the same time, we're also encountering something outside of ourselves, something that might challenge those assumptions, make us see things in a new light.
Ah, okay. So it's like this constant back and forth between our own perspective and the perspectives of others, the past and the present.
Right, and that conversation never really ends. There's always more to learn, more to interpret, more to understand.
So we've come full circle. We started with analytic philosophy, trying to break things down into these tiny, precise pieces. And now we're ending with hermeneutics, which is all about embracing complexity and ambiguity.
I think that's what's so cool about 20th century philosophy. It gives us all these different ways of looking at the world, from the super analytical to the more interpretive and experiential.
It's like we've got this whole toolkit for thinking about the big questions, and it's up to us to figure out which tool to use in each situation. So as we wrap up this deep dive into 20th century philosophy, what do you think is the most important thing for our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the most striking thing is just how relevant these ideas still are today. Like, we're living in a world that's changing so fast, where we're constantly bombarded with information. And 20th century philosophy can give us some really helpful ways of navigating all that complexity.
For sure. It reminds us that we're not just passive consumers of information. We have the power to think for ourselves, to question what we're told, to find meaning in a world that can often feel pretty chaotic.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So to everyone listening, I'd like to leave you with this. Think about everything we've talked about today, all these different philosophical ideas. Which ones resonated with you the most? And how can you apply them to your own life, your own work, your own way of seeing the world?
It's a journey of exploration, and I hope this deep dive has given you some new tools and perspectives for the road ahead.
Me too. It's definitely given me a lot to think about. Thanks for joining me on this philosophical adventure.